All right, the purpose of this tutorial is to look at creating a 360-degree VR animation in Blender and then working that later on in After Effects to add additional elements. And here is the example of what we're actually going to create today. So this is a YouTube video that you can pan around in. We've got this 3D model that we're generating from Blender, but then this yellow text and the picture of Rick and things like that, those things are all created in After Effects, and we're using After Effects to composite them on top of each other to match them up. And I've been working on it for a little while, and this is the workflow that I've come up with and just wanted to share it. So first we need to get a model to work with. So I'm going to select all and delete everything so I don't have anything here, and we're going to get our model off of Sketchfab. So just in your browser, sketchfab.com, and type in Rick Roll Bridge. It's a good one to use. So use this first one, Rick Roll Bridge. This is photogrammetry by Artfletch. Artfletch does some really cool stuff on Sketchfab. Highly recommended. This is a nice, really nice photogrammetry model, and this is where Rick Astley dances for part of the Never Gonna Give You Up music video. What's especially nice about this is it's available for download. So you may need to sign in to do this or create an account, but just click download 3D model, and we're going to download the OBJ. So I'll take that model, that OBJ zipped file, we'll open it up, and strangely, I don't know why they do this, but there's almost always a second zipped file, and that's really all you ever need is that guy there. So we'll just delete these other elements. And in here we've got our OBJ model, and we have our JPEG, very confusing looking but very useful image map. So I'm going to take this OBJ file, and we're just going to drag it into Blender. By default it says what do you want to do with it. I'm just going to go with whatever it says here. Okay, our building is on its side. Yours may not be, but I'm going to rotate it on the x-axis -90 degrees. And I'm going to make sure that the texture is just going right in to the materials like that. We're going to view this as material preview here. And I'm going to create a camera. So we're just going to have a camera. The person experiencing this VR experience, okay, that's not a very good way to say it, but the person doing it is going to kind of be from an eyeline perspective, starting out here, and they'll walk through the tunnel or through the bridge. So let's create that camera. So let's move that camera up a little bit, maybe to about there. And then we'll start maybe here. That sounds good. At 0 frames, we'll press K and L for location. And let's make this last maybe 720 frames. At 24 frames per second, that'd be, let's see, 10, 20, 30, 40, like 6, that's like a minute, maybe? That would be a minute. I think it'd be a minute. I could be wrong with that. I'm not feeling confident in my math right now. So after maybe a couple seconds, maybe about here, we'll sort of move down into that region. I like to have this little window in the lower right corner. Press the 0 key for my little preview of what's going on. So we'll move to kind of the middle there. So I'll do K and then A for what's available. So we'll sort of move in there. And then for the rest of the animation of the video, we're just going to sort of walk across. All right, there we go. Now, to make this a 360-degree panoramic camera instead of the normal camera it is right now, we need to select the camera and go into the camera settings and change the type from perspective to panoramic. Notice nothing changes. I'm going to change it from fisheye to equirectangular. Don't change any of these settings, and you could change the clip start and end if you wanted to, but don't change anything else. But nothing has changed. And the reason for that is because I am in cycles. That's not why it's caused, but you want to be in cycles and you need to go into a render view. And now you see it for what it is. Now we've got the equirectangular view. So when we render this out, we will get the kind of funky distortion that is involved in a full 360-degree experience. Now, my camera right now, this is important, my camera is not level. That's a problem. I need to make sure that my rotation here is set to 90, so it's straight up and down. And then my Y also, see how I can roll it. See how it creates these weird results in there? We want those to be 0. The only thing we're really going to mess with here is the rotation here. Let's go into our regular view now. This rotation is used just to set up where the initial view will be. Okay, so this is a pretty good initial view for me. Something like that. Then we move along, and then we're done. Maybe I will actually, let's see, maybe I'll move this back so it's a little bit closer to these cars. So we come up, we move back. All right, that's good. And that's about all we need to do in order to start rendering. As long as I don't change the position of my camera after this, as long as I don't change where my model is after this, this is what I'm going to be sending out. However, I also need to send this file over to After Effects. Now, After Effects, of course, is not going to deal particularly well with this entire model. You might have some plugins that you could use to do something like that, but I'm not going to use those. I'm going to work with the After Effects native tools. So what I'm going to do is click on this pillar, add a empty, make it a sphere, and I'm going to rotate this maybe along the z-axis so it kind of sits up against it really nicely. That looks pretty good. Looks like it's right up against that brick wall. And I'm going to rename this GFX.000, for instance. Okay, and then I'll click here, and I will Shift-D duplicate and Shift-S selection to cursor. And this guy here will also do some rotating, just to line it up with that wall a bit better. RX. Here we go, and that's going to be named GFX.001. And here we go, Shift-S selection to cursor. Just get a rough approximation of where everything is. Maybe I'll do one over here. Let's do a couple on the other side, just in case. I'm going to bring up the arrows so I can see them here. Maybe, pardon me, maybe one way over here. That looks pretty good. Maybe a little rotation here on the x-axis. All right, so I've got, how many now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 GFX references. Let's do one on the ground. Okay. I'm not being super precise here, but a little precise, but only a little. And we'll do one on the ceiling, just so we've got that reference there. Ceiling's got a weird shape to it, so it'll be a little trickier to make that fit, but okay. Now I think as we come in, we might put some lettering right here on the front in After Effects. So let's maybe put a point maybe around here. Selection to cursor. Make sure he's, so you can see the rotation is way off for that. So we'll just want that rotation to be a lot closer to what we want. Well, that works pretty well. And maybe we'll do one on the opposite side, maybe about there. Let's do one that's like right at the peak, like right there. Oh, that's pretty good. Okay, so we've got those three. So now, in fact, if we sort of hide our Rickroll bridge, you can see how these points are kind of laying out certain elements of what's going on. Now I could name these. I kind of know what they are right now. It might be a smart idea to name them beyond GFX. Like I call this pillar 1, 2, 3, 4, reverse pillar 1, maybe reverse pillar 4, ground, ceiling, the arch. So that's a thing you might want to do. For me, this GFX is going to work okay, I think, for what we're doing right now. Okay, now we're about ready to export, but before we do that, we need to make sure all of our frames are formatted correctly and everything. So we're going from 0 to frame 720. We are running at 24 frames per second, which is what I like. We need to know that for the export that we're going to send to After Effects. The resolution needs to be 2:1. So if I set up an equirectangular image and did like 1000 by 1000, it would let me do that. But it's not correct. This isn't what it's supposed to be. What it's supposed to be would be 2000 by 1000. And what we're really going to do is use powers of 2. So instead of 2000 to 1000, I'm going to go 4096 by 2048, or a 4K equirectangular render. Okay, 4K because it's 4096. And because it's a power of 2, just makes it a little easier for Blender to process. Now, because the only thing that's rendering is this bridge, and I'm going straight into it, so it's kind of like an emit material that isn't actually emitting anything other than just being fully visible to the camera. I don't need a lot of passes for this to work. So in my settings here, I'm going to go into render, I'm going to turn off denoise, and my max samples will be something really small, like maybe I'll just sample it 4 times. That might make it a little, that's 4 is fine for this purpose. Noise thresholds, gosh, I don't know. We'll leave it on. I do have some extra passes that I've set up in the past, just in my default comp. I'm going to turn some of those off. So that won't really, I don't think it'll save a lot of time, may not save any time, but it's good. Just simplifying everything, we're just going right out into camera with this guy here. So with that set, I think we're probably good to go. I want to, before I start rendering, now that I have my format correct, in other words, now that I have, make sure my frame rate is correct and my resolution is a 2:1, I'm going to export this out, which will give me the position of the camera and then the position of all these other GFX markers relative to the camera. So let's go into Adobe After Effects, File, Export Adobe After Effects. You might need to install this. And I'm just going to overwrite this one that's already here. I like to put it inside the same directory as my blend file. I make a folder called JSX. And I make sure that selected only is checked. So it's not sending out everything, just the stuff that I've selected, which is really everything but the bridge. And now it's done. Now I can save this, press Control F12. And it starts rendering, and we can go over to After Effects. By the way, with all those settings turned off, this is rendering a 4K image about 2 seconds per image. So that's, I mean, that's quite fast for what it's worth. All right, over to After Effects, and let's go to File, Scripts, Run Script File. We'll find that JSX file that we had and click Open. I like to name these imports .jsx in the file name. So I know that this is the file that was generated from Blender. This folder is empty, but it sends it out by default, so I can delete it. It has created a solid for every single GFX layer that I did. Just have one window here for now. So here is our view. Remember, our camera moved in and then it moved across, so you can sort of see that happening. If I change my view from active camera to custom view, press the letter C so I can move around it. Let's deselect everything. You can see all the layers that I created. So we have the layers marking the pillars. There's the ceiling, there's the floor. Here's the three pieces that sort of represent the arch. And that's that, I guess that's the final pillar out there. One thing you'll notice as I select one of these layers, that it is actually, that the anchor point is in a corner. Okay, so even though you're kind of inclined to think it belongs in the middle, but it doesn't. It belongs in that very corner. So something just to be aware of as we're moving forward. Okay, so we are going to place 3D elements inside this scene that correspond with these different spots we have here. So for now, let's just make some nice temporary things. I'm gonna make a new solid. We'll call this green 512, and it's gonna be 512 by 512 pixels. And we'll give it sort of a green color because that's what I named it. And let's apply a grid to that. And by the way, you can't see it in this view because this is a custom 3D view. It doesn't show me anything that's 2D. So that's why you don't see it at all, but you will in a second when I click 3D. There it is, right there. Let's increase the border thickness a little bit, and now I'm going to shift parent that to GFX 000, and it goes right there. Now, I know that this layer, just by looking at it, is one of my pillars, but it's rotated the wrong way. So I'm going to go into my rotation. We're going to do the X rotation, probably like that, negative 90 degrees. Okay, I think I'm going to make it a bit smaller. And now I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'm going to hold the Option key and make it a child of GFX 001. That will maintain these changes I just made, but moving it so that it's basically so the transform parameters are the same, but now it's relative to this empty instead of that empty. You could do the same thing with 2 and the same thing with 3. Those were my pillars. Okay, maybe I'll color these guys like yellow, just so I can keep track of what's what. Okay, the next one we have is the opposite, is that the opposite side pillar? Yeah, opposite side pillar. So we'll option drag to that one. And maybe this guy will make a different color like orange, just so we can keep track of what's what. But he is sort of maintaining that look. You will notice that these guys, the arrow is pointing in, and on these guys, the arrow is pointing differently. So as we put things up, we may need to do additional rotating, but for now, we're not going to worry about that. So he's a child, they're a child of 14. This guy's going to be a child of 13, holding the Option key. That'll move him over there. There we go. Now we'll just do the next one up in line. That's the floor. And this guy also needs to be rotated differently. So I think we want to rotate on the x-axis like that, back to 0. He's parented to, once I duplicate it, layer 14. So let's make this one a child to layer 13, which is the ceiling, and we'll just leave it like that. And then our final ones are these 3 arch elements, 1, 2, 3. Well, I don't actually want to do it 3 times. Let's give these guys a different color, lavender. 1. And we're going to rotate this guy so he's pointing in a more reasonable direction. Let's see. There we go. Let's do that, which would be negative 90. Boom, boom, and boom. Okay, so the reason I'm doing this is because these things are actually visible in the 3D scene. So if I were to go back to my active camera view, We can see these things as we move around, but it's not a 360-degree render. You've probably noticed. And we need to make it a 360-degree render so that it can be properly composited over our Blender output, the Blender render. So let's just go in Photoshop here for a second. We're going to create a box camera, basically. So if you think of a box like this, and if we put this box in the exact position of the camera that we imported, you could add 6 cameras to it instead. So here our cube has 6 faces, okay? And one of those faces will go to the front, one will go to the back, one will go right, one will go left, and then you have up and down. That is 6 cameras here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we are going to create a situation where this composition is being viewed by 6 different cameras, each pointing different directions that complement each other. Let's rename this file for you. It was the JSX import file, but I've done a lot to it since then. So we're going to rename this the base 3D camera scene. In fact, maybe instead of base, I'll call it AE, the After Effects 3D camera scene. So this is a scene where I set everything up. Right now I'm looking through my camera, but honestly, you really don't need to, and you should go into custom view. Don't change it here. If I hit C and did something like that, that's very, very bad, because that actually changes these keyframes there. You don't want to do that. In fact, you should probably lock that camera down. We're going to go to a custom view so we can see what's going on here as needed. But we are now going to take our 3D camera scene and bring it into a new composition. Okay, we're going to make this guy 3D, and we're going to collapse transformations. Look what happens when I collapse transformations. It turns into, in fact, if I go into a custom view here, it turns into like a full-on 3D layer that I can interact with, which is pretty handy. It's pretty cool. I think, at any rate, that is pretty cool. So we are going to, what happens is when you do this camera that we brought into our 3D camera scene is no longer applies. If I want to look at this through a camera, I have to bring in my own camera, which is what I'm going to do right now. Layer, new camera. Just click OK. Don't worry about the settings yet. We will worry about it later. And now this camera, I don't know, now if you move it, it's actually moving our camera, which I'm going to undo so I'm not messing with things. So we want our camera to follow the movements of this camera. We want them to be identical. The way we're going to do that is not by moving this camera or doing something with this camera, but this camera is going to be the child of another layer. So we're going to make what I like to call the red 50. Make it red. We'll make it 3D, and we are going to write some computer code. So first, I'm going to change the name of this comp so there's no confusion. This is going to be called a cube cam, because we have all those cameras on the cube. This is going to be our front cube camera. Now we are going to go into our position, and we want the position of this red 50 to match the position of this camera. So this camera has a position. It's right there. Okay. So one way to do that, there's a bunch of ways to do that, but maybe one easy way to do it is to actually make it visible. Option click the red 50 position and drag that over position and click OK. Now, that's super quick, writes a lot of the code for us. A lot of times I'll just write this out by hand also. But I want to make one change to this. So right now we have comp, and then it has the name of the comp, dot layer camera. The trick for me is sometimes the camera might change as we do updates, or maybe I use this as a template for other things. So instead of doing layer camera, I'm going to type in active and then capital C camera like that. It will have the same result because this camera is our active camera. So with that done, now I can copy this, and I want to do a similar formula for all of the rotation attributes, including orientation. So option click, hit paste, but instead of position, I'm just going to type in ORIENT. It prompts me for orientation. I'm going to hit enter and accept that, then enter again to commit. Same thing here, paste. X rotation, it prompts me for that. I hit OK. Notice the R is capitalized there. This is Y rotation. And then finally Z rotation. Okay, with those parameters, this guy is now going to follow where our camera goes the whole time, which is pretty great. I'm going to go into opacity and turn the opacity on this guy down to 0. I'm going to take the camera and I'm going to shift parent the camera to the red 50. Okay, maybe I'll rename this red 50 to camera follower. Main camera follower, something like that. Okay, so now our camera is following the movement. And if we go into the camera and look at some of the transforms, you're going to notice the position is 25, 25, 0. And that's because this anchor point is 25, 25, 0. In other words, the anchor point of this guy is in the middle of my 50 by 50 box instead of on the very corner like I did on all these guys. So I didn't set it up that way. I don't mind. I just have to know that it's because it's a red 50. It's 50 pixels. This will be 25 by 25. It's going to do that by default, and you don't need to worry about it. But I'm just pointing that out so you don't end up trying to set it to 0 and screwing things up. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. What we need to do now, though, is we need to actually turn this into a box. And something's going to happen when we turn this into a box, which is that if you look at this view right here, if I were to change this to like 2048 by 2048, it changes the view incorrectly. This is actually the wrong view because these numbers that I'm getting here are relative to the numbers that this camera has. In fact, they're identical to. But these position values assume this 4096 by 2048 composition. So in my Cubemap front, I need to make sure that these numbers are relative to this world. And there's an easy way to do that, which is I simply, without holding Option or Shift, I just make it a child of the AE 3D camera scene. Okay. When I do that, nothing changes. It doesn't change the scene at all. And it still works properly, but now, if I change this to 2048 by 2048, notice here it is before, here it is after. Now the things haven't changed. If I unparent this, it shoots off into a bad direction. So that's just a pro tip. Let me undo that. This is, you need to do that. You need to make this a child of the AE camera scene before changing the size. Okay, let's talk about what the size should be. So here is a spreadsheet that I've built. We are working at 4096, which I call my K value. If that variable is K, I've got these formulas here which are not that difficult. K by K divided by 2 is the size of our sheet, 4096 by 2048. The K value of our 6 cube cam resolution is K times 3 divided by 8, which I think is 0.325, I think. You can do the math and find out. So that gives us 1536. The reason for this number is simply I'm trying to get a resulting cube composite, which we'll get to, that is close to, but not smaller than, my equirectangular composite. So the right number will always be larger than the left number is larger than this. So this guy's 1,000 pixels larger and this guy's only 600 pixels larger. That's my point. So we're sort of looking at this left number and trying to get it close. But you want that bottom number to be a power of 2. It just makes the division clean. We really don't want to get rounding errors here. It needs to be pretty precise. Things just need to fall into place really easily for everything to work seamlessly. And so you can do 3 over 8, which is the same as 6 over 16 or 12 over 32. So you could try to do 32 in the denominator and adjust the number a little bit to get that closer. And you can get it closer, but you have a lot more decimals. And I'm worried about getting rounding errors. So I just do 3/8. That's a kind of a long explanation for what really doesn't matter, because what matters to us is 1536. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to type 1536 by 1536. There it is before, there it is after. You will notice that part of the frame has been cut, but the actual framing has not changed. And that's important because our camera is changing its viewport, the angle of view, when we do that. So right now the angle of view is 90 degrees, which is actually what I want. If we look at a top view of our camera, and we've got the front camera and the right camera, say. Actually, let's do all 4 directions. We want our field of view to cover exactly the right amount so that it butts up right against the other camera. And eventually we'll stitch all these views together. In order to do that, if you do the math, you just get right angles here. Because 4 right angles equals 360 degrees. 180 plus 180 is 360. So our field of view needs to be 90 degrees. And this is right now 90 degrees, so that's great. You can set it to different views. It's just like zooming in and out. But we want 90 degrees. Don't worry about any of these other numbers. Just do that number. Okay, that's set up. That is our front camera. And it is moving with the camera in our main camera scene. So let's duplicate this camera. And we'll call that back. This is our back camera. So for this one, we've double clicked, we're in our back camera view. We're going to look at our Y rotation. So we're going to pan it to the right until it's pointing the opposite direction, or 180 degrees for the Y rotation. That's our back camera. Let's duplicate the front camera again. Let's call this right. Okay, rotate our Y-axis again, Y rotation. Rotate it 90 degrees to the right, or 90. You can probably guess. Left. CubeCam left will be -90. Okay, let's duplicate front again. And this one will be called up. And instead of rotating the Y-axis, we're going to rotate the X-axis. So we're pointing up, which is +90 on the X-axis. And you can guess if we do, I'm going to duplicate up to make down. And here the X rotation is going to be -90. Okay, so now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have our 6 different cameras looking at 6 different angles from our AE camera scene. Now we need to combine these guys together to create our equirectangular model. There's one step that we need to do, one extra step to make that happen, and that's an interim composition called what I call our cube composite. Okay, and our cube composite is basically 1536 times 3, or k times 3 to the 8 times 3, and 1536 times 2, or k times 3 divided by 8 over times 2. So we're just doing 3 across and 2 down. That gives us 6. And this is a special arrangement specifically designed for Facebook Cubemaps, which is what we're going to do, and that'll make sense in a little bit. So let's make a new comp. Let's make the width be 4608. That's what it says, and 3072. And we are going to call this, let's call it this, the cube composite. I'm going to call it VR, because we're getting pretty darn VR here. Okay, I also have here the Facebook Cubemap lineup. It goes right in the upper left corner, then left, and then up in the upper right corner, so you can just sort of see that layout. So let's do right. Grab CubeCam right, and when you first drag it in, for me at least, it kind of snaps in there, so that's really handy. I'm going to do the upper right corner next, which is up. And then I'm going to do down in the lower left, just because it snaps, makes it easier. And back in the lower right. Now I'm going to do the bottom one here first because it gives me a useful number, which is front. So the front is down in the middle. It does snap to the bottom, but it doesn't snap to the neighboring layers. But if I press the letter P, I can see 2304. Oh, wow, I did it. I got it. Sometimes this is different. And then you just want to look at the Y value, which is 2304. And by the way, if you look on this chart, you'll see these numbers show up, 2304. They're there, 2304. Now we'll bring in our left, which goes in the upper middle. And if we press P, 768 is another number that appears a lot, so that's an indicator we're correct. This number is wrong, but it's really close to 2304. And that's what it's supposed to be. So as we move through, we can see all these different views. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but this is specifically designed for a certain type of three-dimensional, or not three-dimensional, 360-degree experience, specifically one that is used by Facebook. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our VR Cube composite and nest it in a new composition. And we are going to call this VR Equirectangular. That's fine, we can call it that. In the meantime, I'm going to select my cubes and my VR Cube composite and put them in a new folder and just call that folder Cube Camera. Maybe I'll do AE at the beginning of these so I can keep track of what's After Effects and what's not. So I'm going to do this AE _ VR Equirectangular. Okay, for this guy, we are going to apply a plugin called VR Converter. The VR Converter takes an input and gives you an output. So we want our input to be a Cubemap Facebook, which is what we planned it for. And then the output is equirectangular 2:1. And it says the output frame width is 4608, which is not what we want. Right now our comp size is 4608 by 2304. It actually automatically resized our composition to be 2:1. But we want our output to be 4096, right? 2048 by 4096. And now look at that. I'm going to down the resolution a bit. We're getting a movement that just looks exactly like what we'd expect. By the way, if this thing moves around, notice it doesn't even care. Like, that's how this plugin works. So don't worry about the positioning of that. Okay, did we do it right? Did it work? Well, there's one solid way to find out. We're going to take our render, which is still rendering, but we've got a lot of images here. I'm going to bring that in, and I'm going to make a new comp for him and call it the Blender Rectangular Render, something like that. We're 4096 by 2048. The length right now is 22 seconds, but really we want it to be 3001. So I'm just going to make that longer now so it matches all the others. Eventually we'll have these other frames filled in. So here's our moving guy. Let's make our final composite. So I'm not our camera scene. I'm going to take our AE VR Equirectangular, bring it in a new comp, and we're going to call this VR Final Composite. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to close all these windows. Got too many tabs open. Now we're going to do VR Final Composite. Okay, we have our AE file, which sits here. And we are going to put him over the Blender render. And we're going to see how well that works. Let's just pick a spot. Start a RAM preview. And I don't know about you, but that's looking pretty darn good to me. I mean, we did this blind, and look how nice, how close those match up to things. As the road gets clear, we'll see if this distorts properly to stick with it. Right now, it sure seems like it is. There's the ceiling matching up really well. Yeah, so you can see everything's matching up really nicely. As you notice over here, this guy is on the wrong side of the bridge, and so it looks kind of weird because it doesn't have something to match up with. That's okay. It's just a perspective problem because we can't see through the bridge. These other elements, they're really matching up really, really nicely, wrapping around. So let's put some stuff on these now. Actually, maybe let's do one thing right before we do that, which is going to be our VR Final Preview. So let's nest our Final Composite one more time. We'll call this VR Final Preview. And for our preview, we're going to do the CC environment, which is weird. It doesn't say VR at all, and I wish it did. That would make it easier to understand. CC environment. Everything goes black because CC environment needs a camera. In fact, we just set up a regular camera scene. So let's change our composition settings to 1920 by 1080. You know, normal scene size. And let's add a camera. Let's make this camera kind of normal, 35mm film. Yeah, that's good, you know. Focal length will be 50 millimeter lens, something like that. Here's our camera. I'm going to press the letter C, which rotates our camera automatically. In fact, if I press R here, you can see the orientation changing as I do that. And now we have a view of kind of how you'd experience it in like something like YouTube as we move around. So as we come forward a bit, here we can look around and see, like, you know, just how that guy fits right in there. Can look up and see those guys over the bridge. And this is kind of what we've been waiting for, you know. So now I can do some animating or some compositing of elements here. So let's do a bit of that. I'm going to press Shift Option N to make a new window for our preview. And I'll probably just keep this window open most of the time. I always think I don't need it anymore, and I close it, and then I realize I end up needing it after all. So let's go into our AE camera scene right here. And let's do some text. So let's look at our floor here, this floor guy, which if we move him here, you'll see him move there. That's where our floor is. Text window, Rick was here. Let's make it 3D. And let's make sure I'm selecting the right object, which is right there. I'm just going to shift parent, Rick was here, to that guy, and then I'm probably just going to delete him. Delete the grid. I don't need it. Rick was here. Let's rotate him around on the z-axis 180 degrees. Maybe we'll make the lettering larger. Rick was here. And I don't think we really need that black outline for that. Okay, maybe I'll scale that up a bit here. It's already scaled down. And because it's lined up properly, I'm pretty sure we can just kind of move it up a bit. And if I go in here, press the letter C again for the rotator, we can see Rick was here. If we move forward a bit, Rick was here. Let's move him up so he's a little bit closer to the curb. Love it. That looks great. Okay, that's good. Now let's, maybe we will add some text on these pillars. Maybe like from the song. Let's move forward so we can see it a bit more clearly. So what does he say? Never going to give you up. So let's find that item in our scene, which is, I'm pretty sure it's that guy if I delete him. Oh, it's not that guy. It's this guy. Oh, it is that guy. Okay, it's that one at the very bottom. So we'll duplicate Rick was here, bring it on top of that guy. I'm going to shift, copy him to that. And it's like upside down and crazy. Now I can delete that grid. I don't need it anymore. Once again, Z rotation. Looks like we're off. But instead of calling that, we're gonna say he never gave you up. And let's maybe justify that right. Okay, he never gave you up. And as we move through the scene, that's moving, so we'll be able to match up the After Effects composite with the Blender render, which is pretty dang cool. He never gave you up. And then maybe on the render's not caught up there yet. Maybe on this panel, we'll have it say, he never let you down. That's cool. Predictable, but cool. So that'll be this guy. So we're going to duplicate that. And this time I'm going to option drag. Maybe it'll be more, nope, didn't help. Didn't help at all. We're going to rotate that. That's like totally opposite of whatever. So This guy's a scale of 59. Let's give this guy a scale of 59 so they're the same scale because they have the same, or they're referencing the same stuff. Let's justify him left, and let's do some rotating, which I think is x-axis rotating, yeah. -90, oh, I got it, first try. You know what, I might just, let's get the position of this guy, copy that. And actually what I really want to do is just set my position here to be 0, 0, 0. That'll make it be exactly where that point is, which is good. So for some reasons that's just weird. It's not quite behaving how I thought it should. Okay, let's take a look at this, how these two relate to each other. He never gave you up. Okay. Okay, he never gave up, he never let you down. I don't think these guys are perfectly level with each other. Because the scene is essentially level, I could go into a front view, and these two guys, I can just sort of move it there and level them up that way. That works. Okay, I also have some Rick images that I pulled out. Let's see. Let's take this one. So I'll bring in that Rick there. And let's put that Rick where this center pillar is, you know, like a poster of him or something. So we'll bring in that Rick. We will make him 3D. I will make him a child of that thing. Let's delete that. Let's make sure the position is 0, 0, 0, which it is, which is what it should have been all along. Got to do some rotating here. Z 180, and that works pretty well. Scale it down. Maybe that's more than I actually want to see. Maybe I just want to see him there. So let's. I could double click this. Maybe I can just do it right here though. Nice. Little Rick poster. Oops, didn't mean to do what? Meant to do that. C. C. All right, there's our Rick poster. And let's do a little bit, just a little bit of animating here. We'll do, so that's we've got that mask there. I'm going to create another mask that'll sit over the top of this. And I'm going to set a keyframe for that mask. And then I'm going to move forward 1, 2, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 second. And double click this guy and drag him down over the top. Oops. There we go. Drag him down over the top, which gives us that, except I'm going to make this an intersect, which means only where both masks exist do we actually see it. So it'll kind of like draw itself in here as we're moving along. So we could do that, and then after a few seconds we can keyframe assistant time reverse keyframe, so it's like it's open and then it's closed and then it's open, and we can just sort of like do that a few times. Maybe this guy will delete. Did I say a minute? Because it's 30 seconds long, so I got that wrong. Okay, that's kind of cool. And then maybe we'll take our opacity here, set a keyframe for let's close that. Set a keyframe for 100% and make it a hold keyframe. Put that at the beginning. And maybe that'll go for maybe 4 seconds, maybe 2 seconds. Let's do 2 seconds. 2 seconds doing that, and then we'll set it to 0. Then go forward about 2 more seconds, set it to 100%. Then a little more, set it to 0. I can copy these guys. We could do a loop expression on this, but I'm just going to do bing, 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 because it's so short. It's just as fast. Okay, so it's kind of flashing on and off. Now we're going to take he never lets you down. We're going to do a very simple expression, which is going to be 100 minus whatever this guy is. The result of that is that when one is visible, the other is not. Cool. I mean, cheesy, but cool. All right. So if we go back a ways in our 3D model here, you can see there's those items on the building as we come in. So if we were to kind of animate that a bit, move in, you can see this stuff happening on our scene, which is where After Effects becomes a powerful tool, because even though these are kind of cheesy, if you wanted to do stuff like this in Blender, you have to sort of render the whole scene in order to do it, and maybe you don't want to commit to the text, or maybe you're doing multiple languages, or I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do in After Effects that are easy to do in After Effects but harder to do in Blender, and this can save us some time and give us more options. Maybe we'll do a couple more things while we're here. Let's make, this is called the Rickroll Bridge, I think is what he called it. So let's take this center piece right there, and let's duplicate Rick was here, make him a child of that guy. It's pointing the wrong way, so let's correct for that. All right, that'll be 90. And we will call this Rickroll Bridge. And you know what I really want to do for these guys is I don't actually want to see these guys. I want to see the actual things that are monitoring it here. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. That's really all I want to see are those right now. I don't even want to see the camera. I don't need to see the camera. Although it's not the active camera anymore, so that actually would make it not work. To be active, it has to be visible. So I better leave it on. Okay, our Rickroll Bridge is going to, let's give it a, I think it's the, yeah, it's the right side, the back right side that we're matching up with. So I'm going to take up my Rickroll Bridge and I'm going to add a mask to it. Okay, and that mask is going to roughly follow the position of these guys. Which actually, now that I think of it, you can't actually see. I've got to put a little marker in there for it, which only works while I'm at this view. Okay, but what I can do now is I could like apply a stroke and apply the stroke to this guy and make it like a little bit thicker. Uh-oh. I guess I better save this. Okay, I have saved it like a responsible adult. And let's go back to the beginning where we can see this kind of a thing. Let's also right-click on our render and just click reload, because I think it's all there now. Yeah, our render's done. And I'm just going to go into Edit, Purge, All Memory and Disk Cache. I'm just going to delete the whole dang thing. Okay, that should free up some space here. If we go into our preview, which is, it's really struggling with that preview for some reason. Here's our Rickroll bridge, which people may not really notice that that's there, but I notice that it's there. If we go into a I think I might be struggling with that stroke for some reason, but I'm not sure why. Maybe I just need to make that stroke larger. Let's make it bigger, like 10. This is really unusual. I haven't really experienced this before. Okay, so yeah, that's probably matched up to where it needs to be, but I'm going to have it followed now the actual arc of the bridge. So I'm going to view delete guides. Where are you? Delete guides. Well, clear guides. There you are. Clear. Come on, man. All right, now, of course, I'm assuming this actually lines up, which it may not, but we're going to be close because we did put these markers down here. So okay, so with that said and done, let's do the Rickroll bridge and just, let's see, Rickroll bridge. Set the text to have a path, and the path will be the mask. So that causes it to follow it. Let's turn off that stroke filter now. Actually, I feel like we need that stroke filter for one more minute because this part is too high. I'm genuinely confused why it's taking so long to calculate that. I don't know what it's... All I can think of is that it must have to do with the stroke. Let's see, if I turn off the stroke, it goes way faster. Okay, it's weird. I don't understand it, but I can accept it. Okay, take our Rickroll bridge, maybe make the letters a bit bigger. There we go. You know, there you go, the Rickroll bridge. That's cool. As we move forward a bit, so we're kind of like moving underneath it. Let's make sure it's kind of placed more or less correctly. We can also look at this in our VR final composite view. It's another place where you can look at this. You can kind of see how well it lines up with the morphing of the rest of the shape. And actually that morphs pretty well. So once we get about here, if we move beyond it, we talked about this before, in our view here, that looks weird. It's like it's going through it and it doesn't want to, or whatever, you know what I mean? It shouldn't be visible there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back a bit until we're right underneath it, which is about there, I think. Yeah, it's like you can't, like you can see it, and then after a minute, it kind of disappears. And at that moment, we're just going to take our text and just trim it out, so it doesn't, so it's not there anymore. Okay, we'll go into our VR Final Composite and see what else we have in here that's exhibiting that kind of behavior. So let's remove this. Let's put our camera up on top. That's a good practice. Make everything visible. Go into our Final Composite. So this little grid here really shouldn't be visible at this point. Maybe we should put some text on that, huh? Let's, what does he say? Never turn around? Never, does he say never turn around? I feel like he says never turn around. Let's grab Rick was here. Never turn around. And we're gonna take never turn around, put him over that guy. Well, we are going to turn this guy around. Let's clear out everything and see what we get. definitely not what we wanted. X 90. Where are we? There we are. Never turn around. Let's check our position. 0, 0, 0. That's good. Now we're going to make some adjustments to that. Okay, so if we go into our VR Final Composite, at a certain point, never turn around kind of is visible through the bricks there. Okay, we don't want that to happen, so go up to about here, and then we'll trim that on the left side so it disappears until you get to around there. That's it. We've got a ceiling thing, but we're probably not going to do the ceiling thing, so we'll just turn him off. I don't even know what that is. What was that? Oh, that was the other pillar. Well, yeah, we won't do that. We'll just turn off all the other grids. Okay, there we go. So that's our nice little composite here. Our VR Final Composite that we're going to render out. Now, right now the background is black. It's alpha, basically, if I turn that on. It's just an alpha channel thing. So let us make a solid. That's kind of like a bluish gray color. That's the comp size. And put it underneath it. It's not very interesting, not very exciting, but it's a thing we can do here. There's some other things we could do, but I don't want to get into it in this tutorial, so let's just leave it at that. The easiest thing would be to, I think, would be to take a 360-degree photo, stick it in here, and render it out in Blender as a background effect. So it could, it'd be like a separate pass that you'd put underneath it. Ooh, look at the very end, everything disappears, and I think that's because, yeah, the Blender Explorer does this thing where it misses the last frame. You don't want to, you just want to go to the end and just, yeah, option right bracket. Okay, that fixes that. So we got this 30-second move through. Never turn around. Rick was here. Is that Rick was here too big? Maybe it should be smaller. I feel like maybe we want that to be smaller. Let's see. Rick was here. That could be too big. It's hard to say from this view. I actually didn't do the calculations to make sure that this represents YouTube correctly, and I feel like right now it probably doesn't. But let's take Rick was here and just scale it down. But let's also move him up a bit. Because everything else is justified one side or the other, I'm going to justify this to the right. That's just a slightly better design. Not that we're going for like amazing design on this. You know what? I'm gonna do one more thing. I'm gonna take Rick was here, duplicate it, make it a child of that guy. And this is just going to say in parentheses, Rick, move it down. Okay, that's weird, but but now we got that thing. Okay, we're going to render this out, and I'll get back to you in a minute, and we'll talk about how to prep it for uploading onto YouTube. Okay, the render is finished. Let's take a look at it. Yeah, everything's moving really nicely. Look, Rick was here. There's Rick. Okay, we're about to the end there as we move around. Okay, we're going to compress this into an MP4 before we upload it to YouTube. I am going to make it nice and generous in its compression. I don't know, 30 megabits per second or something like that. But what's really important here is that you check the box that says Video is VR at the bottom of the Video tab. You don't need to change any of the settings here with the type of thing we're doing here. Most of this is if you're not doing a full 360 or if you're doing it stereoscopic. In other words, two different versions of this video, which we could potentially do, but I haven't figured out how to do it with as a composite. So just check Videos VR, click OK. Now we'll process that guy. And we're done. Here's the MP4 version, and there is the full larger version. You can see this one is 113 megabytes and the other one was 1.68 gigabytes. So we go into YouTube to upload the video. This isn't really a tutorial on how to do that because YouTube just figures it out at this point. It really does. So we'll call this 360-degree VR Blender to After Effects workflow example. And let's see, I need to check that box. Let's just check that. We'll click Save. Here we are. We're processing the video. Okay, here we are. Maybe I'll make it a bit smaller. Now as we move, we can move around inside YouTube. There we go. And if you did not inject it with that VR checkbox, this would not have worked. It would have, it would just show up as that big funky equirectangular image. And that's it. That's what we did. Good job. You did it. Took a while, huh? It does take a while to do this sort of a thing. So we've got quality options. Looks like it's already got it up to 4K now. So now we're at the full resolution here. 8K is a really nice option if you have the time and the processor to do it. I did 4K here just so we could work quickly enough for this tutorial. But this was a pretty fast process overall to create something as complex as this. You know, to have the ability to do this 360 movement and to have 360 2.5D elements on top of it. I think that's pretty cool. So that's it. Hope it was useful.